Hi, folks. Nathan Pierce here with Family Protection Ministries. I'm working today on making sure that we're on top of all the bills that have been going through the California State Legislature. Right now, there's a whole bunch of bills that we're watching that are on the most of which are in the nearing the end of the legislative process. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today and get into a couple of basic principles of what we do here at FPM. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Frontline with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the Frontline. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about sort of the end of the legislative process. But I want to kind of take a step back and look at the big picture of the legislative session here in California, how the legislature works, and their timeline. So specifically, we have a 2-year session in California that's different than other states. California is called a full-time legislature, and they do occasionally take breaks, like they took about 4 weeks off in the second half of July and the first half of August this year. So that's called the summer recess. They have other times where they take holidays or they take a week off here and there. They take a winter break. Right now, they are in session very much, and they're finishing up committee hearings this week. And then next week and the following week, they will be doing floor sessions. Floor sessions is a little bit different than committee hearings because they have the entire Senate and the entire Assembly gathered in their respective houses to vote on bills that have gotten through committee and are now sitting on the floor waiting for a full floor vote. And a floor vote is where the entire chamber, one chamber has a floor. The Assembly with 80 members has a floor where in their chamber, when they're all gathered together, they have floor votes, which is where all 80 members are present and they all 80 of them vote on a piece of legislation. And that's sort of what happens toward the end of the legislative process in each house. The last act of that house of the legislature is to have a full floor vote before that bill goes to the next step. So in the case of, let's take 495, AB 495, for example, would go, because it's an AB, that means it's an assembly bill. It started in the assembly. And so it was introduced in the assembly and went through multiple committees before going to the assembly floor to get voted on by the entire California State Assembly, all 80 members, and then moved over to the Senate and went through committees in the Senate before it might potentially go to the floor. It hasn't been out of its last committee, but it's been through a couple. It's gone through one committee, and then it's in another committee still right now. And so it has potential for getting out of its last committee and then going to the floor and being voted on by the floor of the Senate, the 40 members of the California State Senate, before going to the governor for his signature. Now, if a bill has been amended in the second house, then that means it has to go back for what's called concurrence. The first house would have to concur or agree with the amendments that took place that were adopted by the second house. So in the example of AB 495, that bill began in the assembly and it was amended. And so then it went over to the Senate. After getting voted on by the entire assembly, it went over to this California State Senate. And then in the California State Senate, it has to be considered there before it can go onto the governor's desk. So there are a couple of steps left for this bill, AB 495. And that's, but they're not very many. It could happen fairly quickly once the bill, if a bill comes off of the suspense file, which is where AB 495 is, as well as AB 727. Both of these bills are in the Senate Appropriations Committee suspense file, which is being taken up uh, and will be reviewed tomorrow on Friday, the 29th of August. And a whole bunch of bills, hundreds of bills will be considered to come off of the suspense file, and some will come off the suspense file. Some will be tabled or kept in the suspense file. That would be called held under submission at this point, because we're halfway through the 2-year session, and those could stay in the Senate Appropriations Committee through next year, or be brought out at any point in time that the leadership of the legislature wants to bring those out. So in the case of 495, the the bill could come out tomorrow, or it might stay in there. Or one other option is that it could actually come out as amended. They could announce amendments tomorrow to AB 495, and they may not even have them in writing yet, but they have an idea. So they might pass the idea, AB 495 as amended, without actually having any wording for it, in which case they would wait for that wording to come out before voting on it with the whole state Senate. And so in that case, then it would, after getting voted on by the whole state Senate, then it would go back to the California State Assembly for concurrence, and then go to the governor's desk, assuming that all those votes, it got passed. So when we look at this legislative process, as I've mentioned before, I always look at it as every stop along the way, or every place that it gets considered, every place that there's a vote, these bills have a potential to die. They have a chance to die. It's an opportunity for those bills to be killed or stalled. And we love bills dying for the most part, because most bills are not good. So we want to see bills not move forward for the most part. It's rare that we are in favor of a good bill, because there's so few good bills compared to the number of bad bills. So ultimately, this bill, AB 495 and AB 727, we would just ask that you pray that those bills would not pass, and that California would not adopt those bills. And I think I'd like to take sort of a step back and look at the bigger picture here, because both of these bills, AB 495 and AB 727, they both go after a particular thing, and that's the family. And we here at Family Protection Ministries want to protect the family structure, the family as God designed it. The family that God made in Genesis is the same design that God maintains today as a family that we should be protecting. This structure of the family that's the core of civilized societies is something worth fighting for. And I think it honors God when we defend that family and look at what God designed and say that is good, and perversions of this are not good. One issue with 727, AB 727, which is the ID card bill, which promotes the LGBT activist organization having access to children and giving them their counseling services through the Trevor Project. That bill sort of undermines the concept of family by promoting the LGBT agenda. And I wanted to address a little bit about that and why that's a problem for the structure of the family, the integrity of the family, the integrity of the family in the California law and the California culture. So looking at what the Trevor Project would like to do, and with these ID cards, they really have better access to be able to do that. We need to look at what is it that they're after that's a problem for us, and we have to recognize there's a real issue with undermining the concept of family, which at its heart really is made up of different parts. There's, the man, the woman, children. That's what the family is made of. And so when you undermine the parts of family, which would be man, woman, genders, respectively, then you undermine the family itself and you undermine God's design. So when God created the world, he didn't simply speak the stars and oceans into existence and then leave humanity to figure life out on its own. Instead, he designed the structure of our relationships at the heart of this big picture design and creation and man's place in it. He designed the family. He created the family in Genesis. It tells us that in Genesis 1:27 and 28, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And in the passages that follow, you can see the tracing out of God's God's provision for family. And you can see that God opens the womb. You can see God's blessing on a man and a woman together in a family, being parents. And we also see that God is very clear about it being a man and a woman getting married here. That's very clear, and it's also clear throughout the rest of Scripture. And we have to see that that was designed to foreshadow Christ and his church. This is a design that is very much at the core of God, not just showing his gospel, but displaying it, showing how God is honored through the gospel, the big picture, and how the family is a picture of that big picture gospel message. So the design wasn't random, it was intentional. God made man and woman complementary, not identical, so that together they would reflect his image and fulfill his calling. And marriage and family were never meant to serve only human happiness, though joy is certainly a part of God's blessing, but ultimately the family was created to bring glory to its creator, God, and display his gospel message. So I think looking at the things that undermine the pieces of that help us to see when we see that those pieces are undermined, when we see gender being undermined, we can then connect that to the family being undermined. And when the family is undermined, culture and society is undermined. It's left without a stable footing, because really the family, the nuclear family as God designed it back in Genesis, is the bedrock. It's the foundation for any stable society. And we need to be willing to stand up for that family, to stand and say, this is God's design. A perversion of it is wrong, and it threatens our existence as a civilized culture, society, and it's just biblically wrong and goes against God. So we need to recognize that marriage reflects Christ and the church, and we need to understand that our place in all of this is to live as godly families, live to the best of our ability to bring glory to God in how we conduct ourselves as parts of a family. But also we need to protect the family as God designed it and call sin when we see perversions of the family out there or perversions of gender out there. We need to acknowledge that and call it what it is, and acknowledge that God, the creator of the family, has an intentional foundation for the family, an intentional structure, and that when we stray from that structure, we are writing the destruction of our culture. So hopefully that gives a better idea of why it's so important to go after bills like 727 that promotes young people having counseling from LGBT advocacy organizations like Trevor Project, and also the bills like AB 495, which undermine a parent's authority over their own children. So ultimately, we need to be praying for the legislators that are behind these bills. We need to pray for the bills to not pass. And recognize that ultimately this isn't really about us, it's about God. This is a piece of his story, and we want to be part of it. We want to be engaged. We want to be defending God and speaking his truth, because it is the truth. When we defend biblical family, we're not merely protecting a social unit, we're upholding God's glory because it's his design and the family belongs to God. Whether we're in marriage, parenting, daily family life, let's remember that God created family to honor him, and when we live according to his design, we experience not only his blessing, but also the privilege of putting his greatness on display for the world to see. So remember this as we oppose these bills, AB 727 and AB 495, and future legislation, because it's really important to defend God's design for the family. So stand with us. You can donate to Family Protection Ministries and our work at our website, fpmca.org. You can also take action on these two bills, AB 727 and AB 495 on our website. Just go to fpmca.org and click on our bill tracker, and it'll give you more information about these bills. And right now, today, I would encourage you to call your California state senator and ask them to vote no on AB 727. And then call again and ask them to vote no on AB 495. Don't add both bills to the same phone call. It's really best if you can do a separate phone call for each bill. But again, call your California state senator, which you can find that by looking up who your legislator is on our website at fpmca.org, and ask your legislator that when they answer the phone, all you have to say is, I would like to ask that you vote no, that my senator vote no on AB 727, and ask them to vote no on AB 495. That's it for today. Thanks so much. See you again next time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Frontline with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.